now more than ever, people need to go within and plug into that cellular memory, plug into divine source, detach as much as possible from the matrix. Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're listening to Bartley's Commentaries on the Cosmic Wars. Today, I will talk about, among other subjects, survivalism in a MyLab context. We've heard of preppers, we've heard of survivalists, we've heard of people learning to live off the land. Indeed, entire armies have done this in the past during military campaigns. But I'm going to talk about it from a MyLab context. First of all, the term MyLab. In the past, I always used the term MyLab because it was convenient, and some people in England or Australia would pronounce it MyLab. But having been taught English in California and other places in America, I use the long vowel sound. So if you want to call it MyLab, that's fine. I call it MyLab. Either or, it's the same. And in the past, I used the term MyLab just as a kind of a generic term to describe people who have had legitimate alien abduction experiences, but also on occasion, sometimes quite frequently, have military experiences and covert medical procedures performed upon them, covert psychological mind control perpetrated upon them. And within a MyLab military E.T. Weird Science context, so as to differentiate it from other mind control projects. But I want to emphasize the fact that the term MyLab should not define you if you have these experiences. I certainly do not define myself as being a MyLab. I've had MyLab experiences. I've got a lot of friends, close friends, who've had MyLab experiences. But as far as that's concerned, we are not MyLabs. We are sovereign individual beings who happen to have had MyLab type experiences in our background, in our past, and sometimes in our present. So I want to make that clear. These experiences do not define us. What I've started to see, well, it's been going on for some time now, a lot of people define themselves as MyLabs or super soldiers, and a lot of you already know how I feel about the term super soldier. Nothing super about mind control or trauma-based mind control or manipulation, deception, etc., etc. And there's nothing super about it either, right? Super soldier. Soldier implies minion, underling, foot soldier, someone working for the empire. Okay. So, I don't know why people would choose to call themselves super soldiers. It doesn't make sense to me. It's basically like calling yourself a super slave, right? And the term MyLab, getting back to the term MyLab, should not define us. It does not describe the totality of who or what we are, or what we're capable of doing, or what our potential is for doing good and making a difference and helping in our own unique way to dismantle this wretched system that we find ourselves in, this soul harvesting, soul recycling, forced reincarnation system, right? This matrix that we find ourselves in. So you can choose to call yourself a MyLab. I'm not going to place a value judgment on you or people like yourself, because I used to call myself a MyLab in private conversations with close friends, right? I would say, yeah, I've had MyLab experiences. I'm a MyLab if someone had to ask me, and if they asked me to tell them what kind of experiences I've had, in a nutshell, I've had ET experiences and MyLab experiences. But the latter do not define me as a person. I am the sum of all my parts. I've had MyLab experiences, but to call myself a MyLab, or I feel for someone else to call themselves a MyLab, is very limiting, okay? So, that much being said, let's move on. Lots of talk these days about civil war in America, civil war all across the board. in America, the Soros-funded left increasingly becoming antagonistic, violent, and they want to, the Soros types, the social engineers, cultural Marxists, etc., it's clear that they want to create some kind of turmoil, some kind of mega civil war type conflict in America. Divide and conquer. It's interesting that a lot of people with MyLab experiences have been trained to survive a number of different contingencies, even being trained to survive and deal with zombie outbreaks, a zombie meltdown, a zombie apocalypse. Okay, maybe I'll talk more about that later or on another show. There was a good segment on Monsters and Mysteries in America about zombie attacks, zombie outbreaks, and I feel it's as easy as afflicting, certain swaths of the population with some kind of pathogen similar to mad cow disease, right? Bovine encephalitis or whatever it's called. Something akin to that, or to rabies, just something that just drives people crazy. So they revert to their lizard brain and become all carnivorous and stuff. I don't feel that's as difficult as some people think it is. They're not undead. They're not like a zombie in the truest sense of the word. But the point of relevance is my labs have even been trained to operate in that kind of environment. They've been trained to operate in war zones. They've been trained to survive foreign military occupation and civil unrest and martial law. They've been told by their handlers to not go to the emergency relief centers, to not board the buses, the school buses, to go out to the stadiums for medical help or whatever the excuse is. They've been told to not let their children be taken away by the authorities in these scenarios where there's some kind of mass casualty event or the potential for a mass casualty event exist. They've been taught military skills and medical skills, and in some of the combat operations they've been utilized in, not only have some of them been trained and actually operated or utilized in combat operations here on the surface and off-world and probably in other dimensions with more standard, if you will, weaponry, but they've also been taught to utilize certain forms of advanced weaponry, as well as taught how to generate power, energy, if you will, from within. Generate power, energy from their hands, utilize your mind, a variety of things, okay? But the bottom line is the controllers of these MyLabs, some of these MyLab control groups do have time travel capability. They do have the means to look into the future of our timeline and get an idea of what may come down the pike. A day ahead of time, a week, a month, a year, or years. And there are, varying probabilities for the things that they can see into as far as the future is concerned. Some more likely to happen than others. Nothing is written in stone. But they do take the time to train a lot of MyLabs to survive a variety of different contingencies, a variety of different scenarios, including mass civil unrest, martial law crackdown, foreign military occupation, and the like. And we keep hearing from the lamestream news, Fox News, and now InfoWars has been talking more and more about the potential for civil war and the way that the Soros types, the Soros-funded types, are going. we're seeing more and more of this all over the place. We're seeing it in the college campuses. We're seeing it outside of political events, etc., etc. What we must do is prepare for anything and not look at it with fear and trepidation and foreboding. We must still operate, live, and thrive even in our own little bubble. And whatever goes on out there, goes on out there, but we're still going to live our lives. We're still going to have inner harmony. We're going to still feel joy. We're going to still feel upliftment. We're still going to uplift others. But we have to be operators. We have to think like operators. What would we do if this happened? What would we do if that happened? And these MyLab controllers have taken all this into account. So it's important for MyLabs to have a certain mindset, I feel. That's the mindset. The proper mindset is the basis for survivability, because a certain mindset will instill stubbornness, and stubbornness is the basis for endurance, which is the basis for survival. A belief in oneself, a belief to continue despite all odds, despite how weary we are, how tired we are, the aches and pains we feel. And this also will require, to some degree, toughening ourselves up, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. I've spoken with and worked with female MyLabs, females who've had MyLab experiences, and they've been told by their controllers that when the time comes, they can't stop and help every little old lady, help every little kid they see, every injured, wounded person they see. They just have to worry about getting themselves and those family members that are not quitters, that have some fight within them, and that won't be a hindrance, that won't be a drag, that won't be continually trying to chop the legs out from under them, to seek safety, to head for the hills, if you will. Don't look left, don't look to the right. Just get out there and survive and take your chances the next day and the next day after that and the next day after that. People don't realize what a civil war in the modern context entails. Most Americans are ignorant about the American Civil War, which was a horrific, horrific war. And to this day, the American Civil War ranks number one as far as incurring the most casualties, killed, wounded, and missing. Just some of the individual battles were horrific as far as casualties were concerned. Antietam, on a single day, September 17th, 1862, also known as the Battle of Sharpsburg. The Confederates tended to name battles after the nearest town or city, whereas the Federals tended to name battles after the nearest creek or river or body of water or some other geographic landmark. So that's why the North calls the battle Antietam after Antietam Creek, and the Confederates call the battle of Sharpsburg because of the nearby town of Sharpsburg, Maryland. But on a single day, it's just the highest death total for any battle thus far in American military history. We're talking death and privation on a huge scale. So I don't think Americans can really wrap their minds around just what happened in the American Civil War. And now the potential exists for all kinds of mayhem to ensue, because back then people were much more self-sufficient. They lived off the land. They tilled the soil. They hunted for their own game. They fished. Nowadays, so many people are herded into cities that if basic services are cut water, gas, electric, just for 2 days, 2 or 3 days, if communications of all kinds are cut just for even a short time. They've already done studies that show that, kids and even adults that are deprived of their mobile phone for any length of time, if they leave it at home when they go to school or go to work or something, they suffer a form of almost withdrawal symptoms of just not having their mobile device handy. So you can imagine what would happen for people like that, who are totally dependent on the internet, totally dependent upon their mobile phones, don't have the ability to think on their feet, don't have the ability to overcome challenges. It's going to be very tough for them. Some of the MyLabs I know have been trained, mind you, to loot stores. They've been taught how to go into certain stores and what to loot. Hit up the pharmacies and grab as many antibiotics as you can. Get food that is likely to last for a long time and that's nourishing. And for barter purposes, loot things like bottles of scotch and make sure you have a whole lot of lighters, like big lighters, heaps of them. Because when the time comes, there's nothing that will make a better trade item than a lighter, a simple Bic lighter that's still got a lot of fuel in it, right? And also for one's own purposes. So my labs have been trained to operate in such scenarios. They've been trained, at least some of them, by their controllers and told, when the time comes, you will know what to do, know where to go, and know how to survive in this, that, or the other kind of environment. Now, some would call that, end times programming, callback programming, whatever the case may be. But, half empty, half full. I see it. If someone does have all this training locked away and the mental toughness and the mental discipline to be able to overcome any and all challenges, if that's kind of tucked away at the moment behind the front altar personality, and then when the time comes, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's due to someone flicking a switch or what, maybe it could be as simple as during these futuristic training scenarios, they're shown they're put through their paces in a variety of different contingency scenarios, and when they're confronted with a similar scenario, or maybe even an identical scenario, if, as I suspect, some of the training, whether it's holographic in a virtual environment, or if they've really been sent into the future momentarily, perhaps when they see certain things that's embedded in their subconscious, not only in their front altar personality, but also in one of their MyLab military-trained, military-oriented personalities, maybe by seeing a certain event, certain landmark, whatever the case may be, then they kind of switch into that military survivor, that MyLab survivor, somebody who will just go into operator mode. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. I'd rather run with one than be dragged down by 20. There's a lot of people out there, they're joiner-inners, they're always joining all these different groups, I mean, I don't mind joining a Facebook group. I'm on a lot of Facebook groups, but I seldom if ever take the time to peruse those different Facebook groups. I just don't have the time. But as far as groups that one personally becomes involved with, there are some that feel a safety in numbers. They feel that the more the merrier, the more people of a like mind I surround myself with, the better off my chances of survival. That's not necessarily the case, because some of the people that you may choose to hang your hat on, to hitch your cart to, hitch your wagon to, if you will, They may not have the same mindset. They may not have the same beliefs as you do. They may not have the same determination as you do. They may be the first to want to turn themselves in at the emergency relief centers. Maybe the first to inform on their neighbors who have stored up a lot of provisions, stored up a lot of water. Extreme duress, anxiety, high anxiety, fear of the unknown, fear of what the future, the short-term future, long-term future will bring. This can bring out the best attributes in people, or it can bring out the worst attributes in people. Be very careful who you hitch your wagon to. A lot of the people that are out there that blow smoke about being a truther, being an activist, some of them will be the very first to fold up like a lawn chair, fold up like an accordion. They're just going to be nothing but a mouthy, argumentative, disruptive whiner, instead of taking up their share of the load, their share of the burden, and just shutting up and cracking on and getting on with it. They're just going to be like one of those people in those movies that are always whining, in a survival situation. They're always whining, they're always complaining. And, I, for one, when I see those people, those types of people, characters in those movies get capped in one way or the other, I don't feel sorry for them, right? I remember that movie, I think it was called, what was it, The Edge or something. It was a story about a couple of guys who crashed in an airplane. 3 guys crashed in an airplane in the Alaskan wilds, and they're being chased after by a man-eating bear, right? And it was the same guy who played Hannibal Lecter. I can't believe I forgot his name, but anyway, he's a well-known actor. And there was a guy in that movie. He just kept complaining, a chronic complainer, over and over and over. And eventually, the bear got a hold of him. And you know what? I wasn't sorry to see him go, because he was making too much noise, complaining, just drawing the bear to the 3 of them by all the noise he was making, etc., etc. Be careful about getting around people like that. And you can get an idea of the size of a person by the size of the things that make them angry or upset or agitated. Someone who gets easily flustered, easily agitated, easily upset, you're not really going to want to be around them when the balloon goes up. You're going to want to be around people that keep their wits about them, confident, not necessarily talkative, where they have to release their tension and their nervousness by incessant chatter and incessant natter, but people that are quietly confident, who know what they're about. They're not trying to find themselves. They already know what they're about, and they know what they need to do in order to survive. Because it may get to a point, if things continue in this vein, and a lot of people are talking, throwing around dates like 2020 and leading up to 2030, when things may really start to get hairy. And we're already seeing that with all the laws coming down, all the social engineering, all the cultural Marxism at work, all the violence being meted out by the George Soros-funded left, all these moron, imbecilic, communist-minded social justice warriors, etc., etc. It's like they've been brainwashed, and it's brought out their most base, lizard-like impulses, and they've been empowered. They've been given a forum, a medium through which to speak and to give vent their spleen, basically, scream and complain about all this injustice. And their solution to all this injustice is more restrictions, less freedom of speech, etc., etc. So you think of them as a proxy army. I've said this before, but these social justice warriors, on the one hand, the mass immigration from Islamic countries, where in those countries and the people they bring over, these people don't respect women, they don't respect children, they have a totally different understanding. And many of them And I'll tell you straight up, many of them, especially the males, because of the nature of the religion, because of long-term archontic manipulation, and probably throw in some inbreeding while you're at it. A lot of the males that they tend to bring in, and they bring in a majority of males, and the women they bring in are the obedient ones that wear the veils and, that go along with all this. A lot of the males they bring in are basically demon and entity infested, and that's exactly what they want to turn loose upon society. So one has to be able to survive and thrive in any kind of apocalypse, meaning to be revealed, right? An apocalypse is a revealing. An apocalyptic religion, as William Bramley calls it, is basically an apocalyptic religion is basically an ET created religion, but it's a religion that is all about a revealing of a certain unknown or hidden truth, let's say, right? And so remember that if you do have these experiences in your background, don't look at it at this point as necessarily being a bad thing, okay? You just have to crack on. You have to get on with it, right? That's the cards you've been dealt. You might as well make the most of it because you've already endured more than most people out there. A lot of these people in the so-called truth community, the surface level truthers, they haven't come anywhere close to the kinds of hardships, trauma, fear and terror that you've been subjected to, and pain, physical, emotional, psychological, indeed spiritual pain. So take that and use it, all those experiences, because you are the sum of all your parts. Use that as a means to gain an advantage in whatever situation you may find yourself in. Because the way I see it now, and I've been talking to some people here quite recently, it's clear that the powers that be are starting to pull out all the stops. And there's no shortage of these brainwashed, violent leftists and social justice warriors and all the Islamics they're bringing in, and never mind all the ISIS terrorist cells that are, protected species. You couldn't apprehend them. You couldn't arrest them. You couldn't you couldn't report on them if you wanted to. They're there and they're protected. They're a protected species, and they will continue to be so unless and until this wretched system is dismantled. Okay, so you have to be prepared for anything, but not in a fearful way. Just think like an operator. When you go into an establishment, choose a table where you can see as much as you can of your surroundings. Familiarize yourself with the exits and the entrances of the buildings and places you go to frequently. Know some of the back routes and the different ways to get into public buildings and different ways to get to people's houses, right? Don't always take the same route. Familiarize yourself with your local areas. Even if it means, and not just driving around too, but, even hopping on buses and getting on and off buses, getting on and off of trains, subway trains, trolleys. Just be very familiar with your surroundings. Prepare yourself for any eventuality. The perps are pulling out all the stops. They're creating these terrorist incidents and these attacks upon citizens all over the place in major metropolitan areas precisely to generate as much fear and terror as possible. So, game out these situations in your mind. What would you do if? Have a contingency plan in your mind. What would you do if, right? Not in a paranoid way, but just in case something does happen. Okay, here are some of the things, and again, this may be a rehash to some of you out there, but it bears repeating because the subject is military/MyLab survivalism, surviving any apocalyptic scenario especially if one has MyLab experiences in their background. Look at it as a positive. As Sun Tzu said, we must turn every negative into a positive, every disadvantage into an advantage. What did he say exactly? Something about our weakness is our strength. And I can hear some people out there going, James, you begin sounding like inscrutable Oriental. What you mean, our greatest weakness is our greatest strength? That make no sense. You sound like Big Confucian. You Big Confucian. Well, no, I'd like to think that I'm a philosopher like Confucius, but no, I'm not. I think what Sun Tzu is trying to say is that we can take what appears to be a negative attribute, a negative situation, a negative circumstance, and find a way to turn that to our advantage. I really believe this. Okay, here are some points, and again, it may be a rehash to some of you that are familiar with this information, but it bears repeating. A lot of MyLab training is geared up for survival, military combat skills, and medical skills. If the person has a medical or scientific background, they may find themselves being used in a medical or scientific role in an underground base or as part of an operational unit. And if they don't have a medical background, they may be asked by their MyLab handlers to undergo training as a medical first responder, firefighter, paramedic, EMT, etc. And I know a number of people that have done this. They've gone through this. They've been told by their military handlers to be a firefighter, to be an EMT, etc., etc. And it is certainly a handy skill set to have. MyLabs are sometimes put in groups of people or paired up with another individual, oftentimes of the opposite sex, to see if there is compatibility, which can lead to being part of a team or being paired up with another person, a partner of the opposite sex, as a MyLab couple. And I've heard about this, I've seen this, I've taken part in this, where you're actually in a group setting and like a gal will go down a line of males and they'll evaluate her decision making. It's like, well, why does she seem to choose this guy over all the other guys? Is it because of physical appearance? Is there some chemistry going on, or whatever the case may be? Sometimes these people in these groupings, or when they try to pair people off, they've been mixed with, let me rephrase that, they've been put together in the past. They've been part of experiences, shared experiences together. So sometimes they're not entirely unfamiliar with some other people. They recognize them. They have some familiarity with them. And when they pair these people up, in our example, a male and a female, then they will train them together, put them through their paces, military training, survival training. And there's also a hounds and hares aspect to the MyLab training, escape and evasion. And I've gone through this, and a number of other people have gone through this, where basically you're trying to evade a pursuing force. Sometimes you don't really know who they are or even see them. You just know you're being pursued. And sometimes the setting may be a war-torn city, a large war-torn city that seems to be in America or in Europe somewhere. There are buildings that have been blasted and partially or completely destroyed. The streets would be strewn with rubble. Sometimes you're in order to avoid your pursuers. Sometimes you see your pursuers, sometimes you don't, and you will duck into like a hole in the side of a building and then go from room to room, passing through all these holes in the walls to get from one part of the building to another, using whatever access routes you can find through the rubble and whatnot. And the object is to get away. It's all about escape and evasion and not being captured. And then of course there's the combat training and what seems to be actual combat. And I'm not advocating or endorsing any of this violence, because remember, all of this MyLab stuff is done without the consent of the people going through this. It's mind control, it's coercion, it's manipulation, it's exploiting people who happen to have certain gifts, innate gifts, because of their DNA profile and what's contained in their morphic resonance blueprint. So, these MyLab controllers, they're not necessarily training these people to survive, for altruistic purposes. They don't want these people to get taken up by the surface level control groups that are going around sweeping up and picking people up en masse. They don't want their MyLabs, what they consider to be their MyLabs, to be picked up, because they spent so much time and effort training these people. So it's not necessarily, all this training isn't necessarily done for altruistic purposes because they, like the people necessarily or care about them. It's purely for control of their own operational assets. That's, that's looking at it from their perspective. And what the apocalyptic scenarios may be, everything from all-out warfare, like I said before, to fireballs falling from the sky, mega earth changes, earthquakes, the ground being ripped apart beneath your feet, tsunamis, a variety of things. I think part of what happens also when people have these, whether it's a dream of a potential future catastrophe, natural cataclysm, celestially driven cataclysm, etc., it's possible at some level that people are having, and not necessarily MyLabs, but people in general, right? Whether they consider themselves gifted, intuitive, or not. Some people just tend to have these dreams and visions of two suns in the sky, of fireballs, coming down from the sky, of tsunamis and other types of mega earth changes. Always remember that at least some, in fact, a lot of the people that are living today in their prior incarnations had lived and died through the celestially driven cataclysms. So these celestially driven cataclysms are embedded in their very DNA. It's seared into their DNA. It's seared into their subconscious. Because in a very real way, a lot of these people have already gone through this in their past incarnations. And extending even further back, they've gone through this on other worlds where they've had to leave a planet that was in danger of being destroyed or was destroyed, either by natural means like a sun going supernova or something, a star going supernova, or having some kind of problem, or a planet or a star system coming under attack by the Draco or some other invading force, and maybe one's home planet being destroyed. Okay, see Tiamat, see Maldek, and that's just what's happened in our solar system. There's no telling how often that scenario has played itself out in other star systems and other worlds, right? Because I've spoken to people with very clear past life memories of seeing their world when we would have called them an alien on some distant, far-off planet star system, where they have distinct memories of watching their world be destroyed. So there may be an element to that. That may be part of the reason why some people have these dreams of celestially driven cataclysms, earth changes, etc., etc. I think there's an overlap. I think some of the people that have had MyLab experiences and have had MyLab training have also gone through this before. Here on Earth, whether it was the destruction of Atlantis or one of the other celestially driven cataclysms that radically reduced the Earth's population on the surface. This is not our first barbecue. We've gone through this before. So I believe that's part of, both those reasons kind of enmesh, overlap. The fact that we've lived and died and endured and gone through and survived these celestially driven cataclysms in the past. And that fact has been seared into our subconscious, into our soul memory, into our DNA. And the fact that some people have had MyLab training, have had those past life experiences, and because they have this oversoul at work, these intuitive gifts at work, not only do they have these dreams of celestially driven cataclysms that may or may not be coming down the pike, but certainly their MyLab controllers will probably at some level exploit the fact that they have these dreams. I'm not saying the MyLab controllers or even ETs are responsible for people having these dreams, visions of celestially driven cataclysms and future mega earth changes, future conflicts, war, martial law, civil unrest, etc., etc. But I think that if someone is tuned in enough and connected to Source, connected to the Oversoul, and there's not a lot of blockage in between, yes, I think it's perfectly natural for people to have these kinds of dreams. So, that's where the twain meet. Some people have these dreams, and then they also have these experiences where in a MyLab context, they're having to survive in a world that has endured some kind of nuclear devastation or chemical, biological warfare has erupted, whatever the case may be. In these testing and training scenarios, people are put in groups, and at least they're made to believe in a virtual, whether it's a virtual environment or they're projected into the future in a real life training exercise, whatever the case may be. They are put out there and they are told, okay, you have to survive. You have to, work as a team together. Okay, you pointing out somebody, are the team leader. You have to, delegate responsibility. You have to assign tasks, right? And then the team leader would say, okay, you go get water, clean, drinkable water, non-radioactive water. You get firewood. You bring back food. You scout out the land and find out, what's going on around here. Bring back some intelligence. And people have to work as teams, as part of a team. And they also are put through their paces in a MyLab context of having to survive in pairs, very small groups, or on their own. Okay, so it runs the gamut. And the scenarios vary. Sometimes the scenarios may involve like an alien invasion, like mega ships coming down from the sky and combat with aliens. And what's interesting is some MyLabs have already gone through that. They've battled aliens in a MyLab space op context, in deep space ops, in alternate reality, alternate timeline type ops. So that concept, that kind of experience is not new to certain MyLabs. They've already gone through it, and some are aware they've gone through it. And I can't help but feel that that kind of prior experience, in whatever state of being, in whatever state of mind, in whatever alter persona, can't help but be a benefit. That's just how I feel. I'm a glass half full type of guy, right? You might as well make the most of this skill set, right? Because at some level, this is what we chose. The whole MyLab so-called secret space program, I never liked that term either. And nowadays it's so tinged with kind of, mudslinging and all that from all these supposed secret space super soldiers hurling all this abuse and mudslinging at each other. But at any rate, there's a lot of people that have had off-world experiences, have been to Mars and have been much further than Mars, and have interacted in a MyLab and a personal ET context with non-human life forms, with ETs. So people like that are going to have an easier transition. I mean, it's not going to be a champagne cruise. It's not going to be a walk in the park. But it's going to be a heck of a lot easier for them than it's going to be for your average person. Likewise, because, and I'm starting to think that, the whole Schumann resonance thing spiking up to 30 or whatever it is now is not necessarily a good thing. I think that may be why there's so many entities coming here, so many cryptids coming over from alternate realities and alternate dimensions and alternate universes and coming through all these portals, and more people are reporting seeing demonic activity of all sorts, because the veils are thinning, the worlds are starting to merge, and it's easier for a lot of these entities to come over here. But the ones that are going to have the most difficult transition are those either from a rigid religious background or from a skeptical, inquirer type, bogus science background. Those types especially are going to have a very difficult transition. Good luck to them. They're going to need it. So there's a number of different scenarios that my labs have been put through. I mentioned earlier zombie meltdowns, alien invasions, and some my labs have described a time when, like, literal demons, what seem to be demons, will be manifesting all over the place, broad daylight, attacking people. And I would argue that from a non-visual spectrum perspective, that may already have happened, right? So people have been getting tormented by non-corporeal, discarnate beings all along on this planet, in this dimension, but it's intensifying. The frequency, the intensity of the attacks, the quantity, the amount of the attacks are increasing precisely because the veils are thinning. And more of these entities are having an easier time coming in here. I think that also explains why we're having things like all the disappearances in the forests and the parks and all that, because more and more of these entities are coming up from the subterranean world, and more of these entities are coming in from other dimensions. It's kind of like a free-for-all, right? Think of like a cosmic version of like the Wild West. Everything is like in a flux state. Everything is in an ever-changing, dynamic flux state, free-for-all kind of thing. I think now more than ever we really need to work on developing telepathy, develop the ability to pick up impressions from our immediate surroundings and extending out as far as possible, because there really is no such thing as distance in a quantum sense. Think about the whole concept of quantum, entanglement, right, and quantum non-locality. When we send energy to people for healing purposes, it doesn't matter if they're next to you or they're on the backside of the moon or the furthest reaches of the galaxy, because energy will make up that distance in no time flat. They might as well be right in front of you. We can already do this. We can already send energy out to one another and send impressions and feelings to one another. We can pick up an object that belonged to somebody we know or we don't know and pick up impressions, psychometry. So we just need to begin enhancing our abilities more and more as time goes on. DNA activation. One of my guests that's going to be coming on before too long is Brendan Murphy. He's going to be talking about DNA activation. And I believe there's something to that. And tones and certain frequencies can activate latent DNA strands, heretofore dormant DNA properties, let's say. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is those of us who do have, on occasion, MyLab experiences. How do we bounce back from a MyLab experience, especially, or an alien abduction experience, a really rough one, right? Well, it's important to replenish our bodies with the right minerals, the right nutrients. Make sure you take your B vitamins, B as in Bravo. Make sure you take potassium and magnesium to replenish your body, because sometimes magnesium and potassium may be depleted from your body after a really rough experience. The ETs are frequently taking fluids out of people, but not only that, they're pumping fluids into people, mysterious fluids. We don't really know what they put into us, right? And again, I'm speaking from the standpoint of this is just for information purposes only. I do not presume to be a quack doctor, an allopathic practitioner, a pill pusher. I'm only speaking from my own experience that, when I've come back from experiences, I'm hitting up the superfood green drinks. I'm taking the potassium, magnesium. I'm taking B vitamins if I have them, because I want to get back on an even keel as much as possible. The ETs will inject fluid into us in different parts of our body, near our kneecap, below our kneecap, into our arms, all over the place. They're just constantly sticking needles into people. They're extracting fluid, but they're also putting things into us, right? And so we have to counterbalance whatever it is they're doing to us. And part of our way of resisting, part of our way of fighting back, part of our way of overcoming and triumphing is to maintain a healthy balance: physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, energetic. Because the real work is ahead of us. All this is just the march to get to our destination. And enjoy the journey, folks. I mean, really enjoy the journey. But the real work is ahead of us. So we're just on the march right now. Keep working to heal yourself and heal the all the aches and pains, from an emotional, traumatic sense. Work with your inner shadow. Make it an ally instead of an adversary. And be very kind and forgiving of yourself. It's very easy for people to get down on themselves when they feel that they've come up short, or they made a mistake, or they made an emotional, financial investment to somebody, and that person doesn't reciprocate, or that person turns out to be an unworthy person to be spending one's time and emotionally investing oneself in. Take it as a learning experience and grow from it. Have a little period of sadness about it, but then give yourself a certain amount of time to, feel sadness, and then draw a line in the sand, step over it, and say, okay, now I'm moving on with my life. Because we need each and every one of you out there to just stand in the gap, keep doing the great work you're doing wherever you're at. I know that each one of you are making a difference in your own unique way. You're each holding space, and you're each and every one of you are gaining strength, healing, reintegrating, working with your inner shadow. Your greatest personal victories are yet to come. Always remember that. No matter how humble our existence, we can always strive for excellence in our lives, all across the board. Always remember the power of one. The power of one individual decides to make a difference in their life. I'm so proud that we have these listeners, and we have people like yourselves who write us great comments and encourage us and come up with great suggestions and bring up great topics for discussion. We really appreciate it here at the Cosmic Switchboard. We appreciate each and every one of you. In a future commentary, I'll talk more about what the onset of a civil war in America, if it comes to that, how it may transpire, or what are the warning signs. For example, the breakdown in communications, where no one can communicate with each other anymore, whether it's through the internet or telephones or whatever the case may be. Hence the importance, once again, of developing telepathy, ESP, learning to communicate over seemingly far distances, but from a quantum non-locality standpoint, there is no distance at all. And each and every one of us is a quantum multi-dimensional being. Well, that's this week's segment of Bartley's Commentaries on the Cosmic Wars. Take the time also to watch a lecture that I've just released. I actually gave this lecture last year. It's the military ET connection. The sound quality isn't as good as it should be because I was not wearing a lapel mic. So I had to do what I can to enhance the audio. And so you'll pick up some background noise, like a little baby making noise, but who doesn't like little baby noises, right? I'm sure people are going to complain even about that. But anyhow, listen to or watch the video, because it'll be available in both MP3 format as well as video format, and hope you enjoy it. I'll be talking about the history of the military ET connection. And I think it was an interesting and pretty good lecture, if I do say so myself. Anyhow, I hope everyone out there is having a very pleasant time, and we'll see you next time.